My pleasure to introduce our day chair today, Jim Voss. Scroll down to his bio, he sent me in. He just was a day chair recently, so I'm going to try to ad lib a little bit. But so Jim has 30 years of work experience in the commercial real estate industry that uniquely equips him to help address client business problems and challenges through real estate solutions. His primary activities involve the crafting and implementation of strategic real estate plans for local and global organizations, client lease negotiations in the Minneapolis CBD or Central Business District metro area, and facilitating the development process for large and complicated corporate portfolios. He's very well known in the industry, serves on a lot of boards, and as well as the Minneapolis Downtown Council. It was very fun to join him at a table at their annual event this past month. A great time. So he's very well connected. Jim is a graduate of Gustavus and the Carlson School of Management. Thank you, Russ. Currently serves on the board of the Minneapolis Downtown Council, as I mentioned, and Rise Early Learning Center. He's also a longtime member and past president of the greatest Rotary Club in the world, Minneapolis City of Lakes Rotary Club. When Jim isn't working and serving in the community, you'll find him mountain biking, downhill skiing, or at his cabin in Grand Marais. Please welcome Jim Voss.
Good morning again. It's a privilege to be introducing two speakers today. I want to be really clear, I have never met either of them because Jaqueline Olson, who is joining us today, is leader of the enforcement division at the Department of Commerce. They oversee the real estate industry. We've never met. I've never done anything wrong. So Jaqueline oversees the work of the Consumer Service Center, which works to address complaints about business and professionals, not me, regulating commerce, the Commerce Fraud Bureau, and other licensed enforcement officers who investigate criminal insurance and financial fraud. Again, we've never met. But Jaqueline, we're excited to have you. Jaqueline was joined by Joseph Boche. Joseph began as a special agent for the Commerce Fraud Bureau in 2014 and has experience investigating complex white-collar crimes we have never met, including state and federal cases. He's a certified fraud examiner. And since 2020, he's been assigned to manage Minnesota's automobile theft protection program for the Department of Commerce. You don't want to hear me, you want to hear them. Jaqueline and Joseph, thank you for joining us this morning.
All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having us here so early in the morning. For me, maybe not for you guys, but for me, it's a bit early. But I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to give a little bit of background on the Department of Commerce because a lot of people just don't know what we do before I hand over the mic to Joe Bakke, who's going to talk in depth about auto theft prevention. So first of all, you can go to the first slide. Or do I have the mic? Oh, thank you. Sorry, guys. So the Department of Commerce is a relatively small state agency. We have about 320 people, but we do a lot of things. And this is our mission, protecting and assisting consumers. We oversee 40 different industries, including real estate. And we try to engage with all communities across the state. These are our strategic priorities. You can read them on your own, but basically we're protecting the public interest. We want to be a trusted public resource for businesses and individuals, reducing economic barriers between all classes, all races, all different types of people in Minnesota who choose to live here. Climate change resilience, obviously that's a big topic these days. So that's something we have a massive energy department at Commerce, and that's one of their main goals. And then finally, a strong and competitive and fair marketplace, which is really where enforcement comes in. I'm part of the leadership team. I'm the Assistant Commissioner of Enforcement. This is our group that leads the division in different areas. Like I said, there's lots of different divisions. So what do we regulate? And we have our wonderful fraud bureau, and Joe's here to represent them. We also represent all aspects of insurance companies, insurance agents, real estate, all sorts of real estate, mortgage originators, title, insurance, real estate appraisers, appraisal management companies. So anything involving a real estate transaction in Minnesota is somehow Commerce is connected. And some of you may know commerce just based on your history and your businesses that you've owned and led for your career. But we also do money transmitters, money lenders, which could be payday loans. If you hear that's the buzzword, but they're not really called payday loans in Minnesota law, but that's what we call them. Collection agencies, collectors, credit service organizations, securities, investment advisors. We also have our state chartered banks, state credit unions, our unclaimed property division. I don't know if you've ever looked for unclaimed property, but you can go to our website and try to see if you have unclaimed property from maybe assets that have been forgotten about or lost. Or like I said, our energy division is very big. Weights and measures. So that's the crew that monitors the gas stations and makes sure that you have a gallon of gas when you pay for a gallon of gas, and make sure that when you go to the grocery store, you're actually getting a pound of bananas. So they, calibrate all the scales in Minnesota. We also do toxic toys, telecom, and franchises. So we do a lot of things. I'm always happy to talk to anybody about any of those industries if I touched on any of them that have interest you. But today, the most important thing we're supposed to do today is listen about auto theft. And I'm going to introduce Joe Bakke. He's one of our special agents in our Consumer Fraud Bureau.
Thank you. Just bear with me 1 minute. I need to pull my notes up. But while I do, so with the audience here and then the audience at home, don't raise your hands. Whose keys are sitting in their car right now? And I'm going to bet it's more than a couple people. If you're in the audience here, we won't look at you when you get out to go grab them from out here now. But we're going to circle back as to why I asked that. So auto theft affects everybody in Minnesota, regardless of whether your vehicle is stolen or not. And the reason I'm saying that is I'm going to guess most of the people in the room and most of the people in this audience have comprehensive insurance on their cars. But the fact is, a lot of the people whose cars are stolen do not have comprehensive insurance. And I've been managing the state's auto theft prevention program for about 3 years now, and we started to look at, what's the value of cars that are getting stolen? And one of the interesting things is a friend of mine who's now a police chief called me up within the first month of me saying, I need you to give me the average value of vehicles that are being stolen. And he called, he said, hey, Joe, I just don't think I'm getting you the information that you want. And I said, well, what do you mean? And he said that, the average value of a car being stolen last quarter in our city was only $2,000. Okay, and right now the average value of a car being stolen in Minnesota is about $14,000. And I said, well, Brian, I said, what does that tell you? And he said, well, what do you mean? And I said, who are the cars being stolen from? And the light bulb went off. He went, oh yeah. I said, those people, when they have their cars stolen, it affects them a lot more than it affects you or I or anyone in this audience. Because let's face it, if our car is stolen, we're going to call Enterprise and they're going to have a rental in our driveway by noon, right? If these people who depend upon their cars have their car stolen and they don't have comprehensive insurance, it may only be a $2,000 car, but it is their livelihood in terms of how they economically survive, how they get their kids to school, how they do everything in their life. And oftentimes one family shares that one car. So it's a pretty big thing. And then, I get people, the naysayers who are like, well, I don't care about them. Well, if you don't care about them, care about yourself. It affects our insurance rates. No matter what you do to protect yourself, we all pay for auto theft. And I'm going to bet that some people in this room with businesses maybe have a small fleet of cars. It affects you a lot more than it affects me on those overall rates. So auto theft prevention is a big deal. Looking at auto theft in Minnesota, our responsibility as the program that we manage is to understand the auto theft trends across the entire state. And that means all the way up to Ely, Hibbing, Bemidji, down to Rochester, and of course around us in the city of Minneapolis. And while most of the cars are stolen from Hennepin and Ramsey County on just a pure statistical number, we have to look at everybody around the state contributes to this problem and what we can do to most combat that. And when I end today, the biggest impact on some of these cases is actually outer in greater Minnesota in terms of how they behave with nothing else, their car keys. I'm also responsible for helping to develop and implement plans to deter and combat auto theft on a statewide basis. That includes carjacking. A couple of years ago, that wasn't a big deal, but now it's a problem. And then we award funds to law enforcement, community organizations, prosecutors, occasionally a business group in order to solve and address some of these issues. The numbers, they're staggering right now. Auto theft in Minnesota last year was up to 16,686 stolen cars. We haven't had that number of auto thefts since before this graph, actually back into 1997. When you look at the graph, the red line and the scale is on the right side are the national numbers. The blue line with the scale on the left are the statewide numbers. What's really concerning is while we generally follow the national trend, our slope the last few years has been increasing dramatically faster. Things are changing here in Minnesota, and we need to look at what we can do to prevent this trend from continuing. So I want to talk to you a little bit about like what's going on with auto theft so you can get, you know, your heads around it. Because if even if your car's been stolen, the whole idea of, well, why is this occurring? Why did it happen to me? And I would be remiss not to talk about the biggest issue right now. Who's heard of the Kia boys? Darn near everybody in the room, right? It's a TikTok trend which has changed how auto theft has spread and why it's committed. It started in Milwaukee about 1.5 years ago, and it spread over to Minneapolis and St. Paul. Interestingly, about 6 months ago, I was presenting out at the Pennsylvania Auto Theft Investigators Conference, and I said, who's heard of the Kia Challenge? And out of 90 some investigators, about 2 people raised their hand. It isn't a problem there until it is. And when it comes there fast. But one of our grantees, the city of Duluth, a few months ago had a 12-year-old that went out at night and stole 3 cars to be part of the Kia Challenge. I meet with investigators. We talk about the various intelligence things that are going on and why these crimes are being committed. And yes, they have learned to exploit an aspect of the ignition system of certain model Kias and Hyundais, and it's vehicles where you have to have the old-fashioned key, not the key fob. Now, these vehicles were manufactured within all of the NHTSA guidelines, so it's not like there was some intentional fault, but it's basically akin to hot wiring. And if you've heard of the Kia Challenge, you may have heard the issue of, you know, oh, they're using like a USB or a charging cord or something like that. It has nothing to do with the electronics. It is just a physical mechanism that little plug-in part fits into the part to start the car. So why are they doing it? It's a social media thing. Why? I mean, anybody here on TikTok? Don't raise your hand, right? I thought I got to the end of it this weekend, but back again. It's a trend. They do all these crazy trends. And if that means how many Kias and Hyundais can I go steal and post or stream them online, that's cool. I'm going to be part of that. I've heard that you have to steal 3 of these cars to be a Kia boy. So you think about it. I also look, most of the people committing these are young adults and juveniles. But also one of the things you should understand, most of our auto thefts, it's not like 900 people steal 1,000 cars. It's more like 50 people steal 50 cars and 100 people steal 950 cars. Actually, that's probably a really bad ratio because it's even worse than that. It's a very small group responsible for most of the auto thefts. And you think about it, if you go out and steal 1 or 2 cars a day, that's a lot of cars. So very small groups can affect this problem. And when they learn, basically this is the old fashioned hot wiring. When they learn how to hot wire, they go and do it. Carjackings. So we have the increase in those, and are you able to click on the link there for me? We'll see if it works. Well, maybe not, but okay. So while we're waiting for it, my messaging here behind the video is to pay attention to your surroundings. And I'll tell you, I live in the far out suburbs, so trying to be the responsible person. I got up exceptionally early, not to go hunting or fishing, but to drive out here. And here we go. We'll watch this short clip from Minneapolis Crime Watch. I hesitate to narrate the video because I don't know what's going on in this poor woman's mind, but you saw the part before. Was she paying attention to her surroundings? I don't know the background on whether she knew these people, what the concern was, what was being said, but how quickly did that carjacking occur? Fast, right? And so going back to, I arrived here and got here at 6:30 this morning and parked my car right out front. And although it's a police car, it looks nothing like it. And of course, what am I doing? Working on my PowerPoint from my car, right? Because that's what we do. And that's exactly the advice I'm telling you not to do, because all of a sudden I look up and there's a car stop next to me. Why? I mean, obviously I'm as a law enforcement officer, in a much different situation than most people, but if they were there to carjack me and I wasn't a law enforcement officer, it would probably not have ended well for me. Because I'm not paying attention to my surroundings. And a lot of these carjacking situations, while yeah, it's going to be very, very hard to prevent a situation where you're on a street and someone bumps into you or boxes you in and approaches with guns out. But that idea of paying attention to your surroundings, that's one of the things you can do in this room, of just remember that. Where am I? And this doesn't just occur in Minneapolis. A few years ago, we had hardly any carjackings. And just this last year, we had almost 500 in the city of Minneapolis. So pretty big deal. So traditional auto thefts, these are bullet holes. Do you want this car back? It gets worse, right? But why do they steal a car? To commit another crime is a pretty common occurrence now. That crime may be, they simply do gas drive-offs with the stolen car, but we're seeing more frequently where cars are being stolen to go commit drive-by shootings, to drive out to a mall and go shoplift, to assault people. The days of stealing a car to go joyriding in your uncle's car, and oh my God, I got this car, and you're driving 10 miles over the speed limit, and that's the worst thing you did, and you go to 7-Eleven to get a Slurpee. That's not what it's about anymore. That's what it was like when I started as a cop 26 years ago. That's not what's happening with stolen cars. They're being stolen for other sinister purposes. And they drive extremely dangerously. We do see the occasional transportation ones. I need a ride. As you look at people, you see people just walking down the street. As a cop looks at somebody, sometimes you see somebody walking down the street and you notice every car they're walking by, they're looking in. Is that how people normally behave? Or is it just somebody who's opportunistic, right? I mean, maybe they didn't set out to steal a car, but they got a ways to walk. And when they see a car with the keys in the ignition, it saves them those extra steps. So we do have the traditional auto theft just for transportation, but probably the purpose of that is going down. The biggest economic aspect of auto theft are those cars that are stolen, often put into containers and never seen again. Those are the largest economic benefit. It's the smallest group. But I track our auto theft numbers around the state, and it's interesting that like one of the last quarters, the non-recovery rate, the cars that end up getting put into containers, getting their VINs cloned and resold to somebody else or getting parted out, for the city of Duluth was about 3%, which isn't very, pretty small number. But the city of Bloomington at the time was between 12 and 15%. Something different is going on there in the motivation of why people are stealing those cars. And these ones I can tell you because, the Fraud Bureau, that these are major economic offenses. They often involve false insurance documents, false titles. These are the type of cases that I've worked. We're talking millions and millions of dollars. Really comes back to hit us in the pocketbook. So prevention is the key. And how do we go about that? Well, through my program, one of the things we've done for the last couple of years has been what we call dedicated auto theft investigators. And so we've offered some grant money to get law enforcement agencies, not necessarily to hire another person, which would be great, but the fact is we have a shortage of people who want to be police officers now, so that's really challenging to do. But we've gotten some of them to change their workflow and say, we're going to give all of our auto theft cases in the suburban agencies to one person, or in the larger agencies to try to get a small group of people focusing on auto theft. Why? It's kind of the broken windows theory. You work with some of these auto thefts, they're connected to other crimes. We funded 9 full-time and 4 part-time investigators through this project. And we had a crazy amount of success, in my opinion. And the reason I say that is these 13 investigators were responsible for about 17% of the auto theft cases in Minnesota last year. They were responsible for the recovery of 503 vehicles since the program started in 18 months. When you're looking at around 15,000 stolen a year, 13 people being responsible for those numbers are crazy good. They were responsible for 272 arrests and 156 search warrants. And why that's important is some agencies have so little resources to focus on auto theft that in the last 2 years, they have done no search warrants for auto theft. So creating this focus, it is having an impact because again, it's these same offenders we're seeing again and again. We usually don't catch them. The clearance rate, meaning the cops can say this is the person who committed the crime, regardless of whether it's prosecuted for auto theft, tends to be around 5 to 7%. It's really low. Now you take the city of Maplewood where we funded an investigator and they've had it as high as 25% clearance rate on auto theft some quarters. It's a good success. We're looking at establishing more analyst positions because again, hard to find people who want to do the investigative work, right? Especially as law enforcement officers. But analysts, sometimes an analyst does the work of 20, 30 cops. I mean, we just hired an analyst for the state to help me out. And my God, she's amazing. She can do things that I couldn't dream of doing and a lot more efficiently and faster. So we're exploring and we're adding to that. They help to track our data, to identify crime trends, and recommend opportunities to address the issue. An example of that is we had an analyst up in Anoka who did such a good job. That's the one we stole for the state. But what does she do? She's looking at all these auto thefts, right? And she says, hey, I noticed this this case from a car dealership in, I think it was Blaine and then another one in Anoka. And the suspects both use the same counterfeit check stock to buy the stolen cars. The Anoka and Blaine investigators would have never put that together. Well, then she located 2 other cases around the state using the same counterfeit check stock. How much is a new car? $30,000, $40,000, $50,000? I mean, that's a huge deal. And that's a big investigative lead just by having somebody focus on that. So we're doing more activities like that. We also fund a lot of specialized equipment. And the specialized equipment helps us to use our law enforcement resources more efficiently. When I started as a cop, we didn't even have computers in the cars when I started as a cop, but eventually we did. And I would drive through parking lots and I could type with one hand pretty good. Not while driving, of course, but maybe. And would enter all the license plates of a particular apartment complex every single night on my shift to look for stolen cars. Eventually I didn't have to rerun them because I recognized a bunch of the cars and I only ran the ones I didn't need to. But eventually we got license plate readers. Way more efficient. Way more efficient. So doing things like that. Minneapolis has a really good bait car program that we fund. The Hennepin County Attorney's Office in our last report said that it's invaluable. Because they take a targeted approach to put vehicles out there using some analyst data and mapping. Well, we got an issue with a pocket of auto theft, so let's drop a bait car there. And then these bait cars, they're wired up for sound, they have video, the dispatch can see them. It's just like you'd see on YouTube and so forth. And then once it gets stolen, they get an activation, the law enforcement officers respond to it, they get behind the car, and then dispatch can turn the car off so that the suspects can't flee. And that's how we're getting, again, some of these repeat offenders, but that's specialized technology. These technologies that, so they deter would-be thieves. They help us recover vehicles quicker and return those vehicles to owners because, again, those families really depend upon these cars. So it used to be the average time for a car to be recovered was about 3 days. And now it's creeping up into like more of a 9-day range. That's more of an impact on people. And so it reduces our overall economic impact. So where am I going with all this? Did you know 60% or more of the cars stolen in the metro area are stolen with the keys? Greater Minnesota, upwards of 90%. So when I started this project 3 years ago, one of the things I said is we need to do an ad campaign. We need to get people on our side to understand, stop leaving your darn keys in your car. And messaging, not my forte, because people will be like, my God, Joe, we don't want you coming up with it. So we hired an ad firm and we're rolling this out. And this is the first time we're publicly previewing it. So I'm welcoming any feedback you might have, but take your keys always. Few of our slides that we're rolling out, you hold the keys to prevent auto theft. Car thieves steal more than cars. I mean, on my social media, when a car is stolen, other than the Amber Alerts with children, my God, do people remember the news stories of the ones with the dogs that have been in there? It's real. You can replace the car. Sometimes the things in it are more valuable. What's funny is the ad firm that we hired shared a story with me of they're fascinated by all of this going on, but they said, yeah, we all went out afterwards. And then we were talking and then we thought, oh my gosh, I left my briefcase in the car. And he said, so one by one, we all went out and grabbed our stuff out of our car because we can't lose the stuff in our car. And then, families will oftentimes warm the car up in the winter for the children, which is fine if you have a remote start, but if you're leaving the keys in there, if you're an auto thief, and I live in Hastings, right? It's a long walk being released from the jail to back to civilization, and there isn't bus service, but there's lots of daycares around there. And back in the day, I was the auto theft prosecutor for Dakota County. And where did cars get stolen from in Hastings in this area on a cold winter day? The daycare, right? So that is what we have going on. And that's the messaging that I ask you to follow is know where your keys are. Even if your keys are in your car, at home, in your garage, that's a problem. Don't leave your keys in your car. Take your keys always. So with that, I'm open for questions. So much.
Oh, and Jaqueline, if you guys will come back up, we've got a gift for you. We want to say thank you for your time today. One of the programs that we sponsor is a program called Way to Grow, and they provide books to kids in the 3rd grade. So we'd like each of you to sign those books, and the children will get those signed by leaders in our community. And for each of you, we have a pen with our logo and your name. So thank you for your time today, and thank you for the presentation, and thanks for reminding me to check where my keys are.
All right, very enlightening. All right, I wanted to thank our greeters today. Our volunteers, our greeter, Gary Mosman, reflection and double duty, reflection and day chair from Jim Voss, Happy Bucks led by Sheila Gothman, and then Brock and Greg for our Zoom masters and club admin, both Steve and Dick are here today. So thank you for inviting guests and visiting Rotarians. Please continue to do so. Next week, we have our vocational roundtables. Excited to hear what we're going to be discussing. On the 29th, at the end of the month, Vernon Castile, our City of Lakes Exchange student, is going to be presenting. So it'll be really exciting to hear from him. And then in April, we have Engineers Without Borders, as well as the Sunrise Forum coming up. So a lot of great opportunities to come and listen and learn early in the morning. So with that, go out and have a wonderful Rotary week. Thank you.